on Violence Commission's report, that particular detail that is making far-reaching recommendations about how our national security landscape ought to be, and recommended the prosecution and the reprimanding, including of some ministers. That detail we'll be getting here, plus reaction from the people who understand and appreciate security and the peace-building process here on our front after this break. The Ayawaso Wuogon Commission, ladies and gentlemen, is recommending the prosecution of 3 people. It's also recommending that some others be reprimanded, including Minister of State at the National Security, Brian Champon, for their conduct, omissions, and commissions during that particular Ayawaso Wuogon electoral by-election that happened earlier this year. This is the basic elements they are putting out there. Specifically, the commission is recommending the criminal prosecution of Ernest Akomia alias Double for the unauthorized possession of firearm under Section 1921 of Criminal Offences Act. The commission is also recommending the criminal prosecution for the offence of assault, to wit the slapping of Mr. Samuel George, the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pampram, who is in your show there, by one gentleman called Mohammed Suleimana. Now, the commission is also recommending the immediate removal of DSP Samuel Kojo Azugu, I'm sure you remember him, from command responsibility at the Ministry of National Security, given his failure to appropriately command and control the SWAT team of which he had charged during the operation at the Laobaleshi School Police Station. It is recommended that he should be reassigned. This is according to the commission. Far more than just that, the man who is the Director of Operations at the National Security, Colonel Michael Poku, is also being recommended for reprimand for being ultimately responsible for the outcome of the SWAT operation at the Laobaleshi School Polling Station. Now, it proceeds to say that his liability is further reinforced by his failure to properly define the mission for which the SWAT team was sent and ensuring the SWAT team comply with the defined mission. Further, he failed to conduct an internal inquiry into identifying the culprits of the offense when revelations became rife that there were operational lapses resulting in violations of human rights. It is, according to the commission, further recommended that Colonel Opoku be made to immediately release the weapons that were used for the operation, as well as the personnel which were involved in that particular operation, to enable ballistic testing and analysis to be undertaken, and for further investigations by the police. And there's also a recommendation, that's what we've been talking about all this trial denied. Now, the commission recommends that Mr. Brian Champon be equally reprimanded for his ultimate responsibility as minister in authorizing an operation of that character and on the day of an election in a build-up area. It is on this particular point that I seek some legal interpretation and appreciation. One man who has a proper appreciation of the law is distinguished lawyer John Indebugri. He joins me on the line now. You're welcome, sir, to our front.
Thank you, Raymond.
The first question I want to ask of you is, when a commission of this sort, established according to law by the Executive President of the Republic with a constitutional instrument, as was done in this particular case, when a commission of this sort is established and given a mandate, and then the commission proceeds to recommend the reprimand of a Minister of State, what does it mean?
Well, I don't know what it means. But I know that under Article 82 of the Constitution, Parliament may, by resolution, censure a minister. So maybe the matter should be referred to Parliament, and Parliament will pass a resolution to censure the minister. Otherwise, he will just be given a mere letter saying that he's warned, and he's not to repeat his conduct, that kind of conduct that the commission found to be untoward. He should not repeat such conduct or similar conduct in the future. But I'm saying that under Article 82, that's more forceful. A minister can be censored under that article.
And does the reprimand rise to the level of a censure? Whose responsibility would it be to refer the matter to the Parliament in this particular case? the president or any other minister?
The report has been submitted to the president. The recommendations have been made to the president.
Very much so.
So he is to decide how he's going to handle this reprimand business. And I'm only saying that in order that the recommendation can be implemented with a great deal of force, he could pass it on to his majority in parliament there, his leadership in parliament there, to initiate processes under Article 82 for him to be censored formally. Otherwise, a mere letter to him warning him that he shouldn't do that anymore would not carry much weight.
To your mind, mindful of the gravity of the offense in this case, and this is for his ultimate responsibility as minister in authorizing an operation of that character and a day of an election in the build-up area, this is his offense. Is the recommended sanction in tandem or appropriate, mindful of the offense in this particular case?
You know, I wasn't part of the commission. And then, even though I followed it on television and so on, I am unable to speak more to it because, you know, the commission members considered a lot of factors, I'm sure, and sifted the evidence that was presented before them before they made this recommendation. So it will be preposterous on my part to say that I think that the offense should have been heavier. Now, but I'm saying that the mere fact that it has been recommended that he should be reprimanded. The president can even go beyond that and remove him. If the president is convinced that his conduct was unbecoming, he can remove him. He doesn't need even a commission of inquiry to recommend to him to remove a minister. He can remove him.
The interesting part is that, I mean, the reprimand in this particular case is to suggest he did something wrong, right?
Yes.
So the president, based on that, can also say, my minister did something wrong and ought to be removed from opposition. Yes.
The question is whether he should be merely removed. Because, you see, that thing led to a lot of difficulties for individuals. I don't know whether he cannot even be prosecuted. Because, I mean, if he is the one who authorized this unlawful operation or unauthorized operation, he ought to answer more seriously than just even being reprimanded or being removed. You see, we must set examples, very stringent examples to public office holders, so that they will know that when you are holding these offices, they are very temporary. But people take them and behave as if they are going to be there forever. And they do things that lead to a lot of harm to other citizens.
It's interesting. Now, I need to pick your thoughts on some other recommendations, interesting ones that have been put out there in this report. Now, the other is about the recommendation for criminal prosecution of two people. One, for slapping a sitting member of parliament, and the second one for the unauthorized possession of firearms under Section 1921 of the Criminal and Other Offences Act in this case. Now, it sounds to me that these are things that an executive president would have to make a determination on, or are they supposed to be directly forwarded to the Attorney General? Can the president vary, accept, reject, or decide to enhance even the kind of proposals or recommendation for prosecution specifically for stated crime in this case?
No, well, under the provisions relating to commissions of inquiry, when the report has been submitted to the president, he is free to accept or reject the recommendations, except that you must give reasons for why he is accepting or why he is rejecting. So the article enjoins him, the provisions enjoin him to publish the report alongside, a white paper alongside the report within 6 months of the presentation of same to him. And where he has decided that he's not going to publish the report, then he must give reasons why he is not publishing the report. So it is within, you see, the Constitution has given so much power to the president. The president at the beginning of this commission of inquiry, I said that as far as I was concerned, it was a whimsical exercise because the president would take it and refuse to enforce the recommendation. So we go back to square one. The thing says within 6 months. The president took this report and sat on it for the 6 months.
Yes.
It doesn't say that you should do it in after 6 months or on the last day of 6 months. It says within 6 months. So if it is presented to you and you find that it is a very urgent matter, the very next day you can issue a white paper. Government, functionaries went about saying that the law says 6 months. It doesn't say you must wait for 6 months. It says within 6 months. So a day after the presentation of the report is within 6 months. A day after the 6 months is outside the thing. So even, I'm sure they've been caught they are out of time, aren't they?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Report, and then 6 months have passed. 6 months have passed.
Yes.
It's not sufficient for you to come and announce that you are going to send the report to be gazetted and so on. No, you have to publish the report within 6 months. So if you publish it a day after 6 months, you are out of time. And your publication is null and void.
Now, to our intents and purposes, we are told that the white paper is still going through a certain process, which means that at best, the gazetting process is still ongoing when it comes to the white paper.
The president is out of time. It's past 6 months, or?
Yes, that's what we are told.
No, you should calculate. It was submitted someday in March. So if you calculate, you will see whether it's before or after 6 months.
If it is
after 6 months,
yes,
the report will be null and void. It is out of time. It is unconstitutional. They have published it outside the constitutional mandate.
That's an interesting twist to what is currently being suggested. Now, there is also a recommendation I want to pick your brain on. The recommendation for the national security setup to be streamlined, for the Minister of State at the presidency to virtually be made to know that that minister is subservient to the substantive Minister of National Security. There are also some complaints in the report that suggest that as it exists today, it's unclear how a national security reporting structure is supposed to be. There are so many command units and so many reporting ends, which makes it a bit cumbersome. Streamlining is the recommendation. Is this something that sits well with you?
I am saying that I was not part of the commission, but I find that kind of recommendation curious because the functions of the National Security Council have been set out in Article 84. And Article 85 says that no agency, establishment, or other organization concerned with national security shall be established except as provided for under this Constitution. So there should be no operational center in the National Security Council Secretariat. The National Security Council Secretariat is the National Security Council is a coordinating body to collect information and coordinate among the security agencies. It doesn't require operation, sending out goods to go about slapping people. So that maintaining that agency or operational center in the National Security Council Secretariat is against Article 85 of the Constitution. And I've been thinking that all these people who were affected by these infractions would invoke this Article 85, go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will pronounce on it so that we will be very clear what the National Security Council is supposed to do.
I see.
So this business about reporting and so on is as far as I'm concerned, it is no point. There's no point in it. The point is that the National Security Council is being misused and being misunderstood, maybe. And as a result of the misunderstanding, is being misused. There should be no operational center there. Because if you establish an operational center at the National Security Council Secretariat, you are doing so contrary to Article 85 of the Constitution. When we have we have police CID, we have BNI, we have this, we have that. You don't need an operational center at the National Security Council Secretariat. It is a high-level policy-making body concerning national security, both internal and external. So if that operational center they've established there, can they go to Zimbabwe and start doing an operation there? The National Security Council is not limited to internal matters.
Okay.
It also deals with external matters.
Okay.
And so you shouldn't have an operational center that with heavily built people going around harassing people in the name of national security. I am from national security. There's nothing like national security. There's a National Security Council, and there is a secretariat to that council. There's nothing like national security. But you hear people going, I am from national security. You are from national security, meaning what? Because they have illegally established and operated a police station. Let me reduce it to a more understandable term. You have established a police station within the National Security Secretariat, which is against Article 285 of the Constitution. There are police stations already all over the place. Why do you go and establish a police station there?
Now, there's a question that I need you to help me answer. Prior to the Commission's work and detailing of their work, you had reservations about why we needed this Commission in the first place. You actually felt that it was going to be not so much of a relevant institution, mindful of who takes ultimate decision after its work. At least now you know some part of the recommendations in this Commission's report. In hindsight, do you still stick to the earlier observation that this might be a commission which would be much ado about nothing?
Well, I mean, the commission did some useful work because it was done publicly on, and then it was covered by the media, especially the radio and television. We got to know that, like the argument I've just made, it has come out of their work, that they have a secretariat there with some muscle persons going around doing things unconstitutionally. That is, to that extent, yes. Otherwise, what I said, it is still operating. The man refused to publish the report up to now. And I have seen that the strategy of this government is to establish inquiries and then, treat the inquiries in some wishy-washy manner and use the inquiry that they are transparent. Everything that comes, every allegation that's made is investigated. You twist the law, you twist the procedure, and then where you are unable to twist, the report comes to you, you sit on it until the mandated period is passed. It was from that point of view that I said that I didn't have much hope or much hope in that commission. But at least they did some work. The work revealed certain things in that so-called National Security Secretariat.
I mean,
to that extent, yes. Otherwise, I don't think we are going to get past. That's why I think that we should even wait for the white paper to come out. Why is it difficult to bring out the white paper after 6 months?
Council, you made an observation that it's a trend in this government to specifically set up commissions in a wishy-washy manner and proceed to actually use the recommendations or somewhat recommendations.
Propaganda material. They are very law-abiding and this and that.
I mean, I am obliged, because you've made a very direct accusation, I'm obliged to ask for specific evidence to support it. Which specific commissions are you talking about?
One specific evidence is the one that concerns Ajaku and his vetting.
Okay.
When he was alleged that some money, the way they went
the bribery allegation.
Yeah, the way they went about it, they went outside the rules of evidence, gagging people. People were not allowed to come there and give their evidence. Black, white, and others. People struggled to go there. No, Mr. Joe Garte, my good friend. No, how can you do that? They simply as far as I'm concerned, they manipulated that process and came out with some report. Cash for seats or whatever. The same thing. The same thing. You go and ask Parliament to investigate itself. And you are having your majority in Parliament there. I followed that process. Leading questions. MPP members on that committee were simply asking the witnesses leading questions. Leading questions are questions where you ask them to help them to give an answer which you desire. And that's what happened. That's what led to Dr. Ayine issuing a minority report.
Yeah.
And yet they use that as, even the president himself, he uses those things as examples of how he is transparent. Laughable. He is a lawyer of eminence. These things cannot be marks of transparency.
I'm afraid I have to leave it off here. And as usual, I'm grateful for your time spent with us this evening. Thank you so much, sir.
All right.
John Indebugu is a former member of parliament for Zebila. He's also been a PNDC secretary in times past. He's also been in and out of several political parties in the Republic of Ghana. And more importantly, he's a lawyer with the proper appreciation of the law. But let's move from stringent legal practice to somebody whose sphere of engagement is pretty much big and huge. But before I introduce to you my guest, maybe I should do it now. I'll take a break. When I come back from that particular break, the Honorable Emmanuel, you have a middle name, Habuka. Habuka Bombande is my guest. He's a senior mediation advisor at the UN in the Department of Political Affairs. After the break, we will seek to navigate these matters properly. You're welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Alqua, and tonight on Upfront, our conversation started with that particular report which is just being released and the details of which we've been giving you. The recommendation for the prosecution of 2 people, the reprimand that's been recommended for the gentleman who's in charge of that particular unit at the National Security, which is for operations, and also the recommendation for the reprimand of the Minister of State at the National Security, the man by the name Brian Champon. Equally substantive is the recommendation for the removal of that very huge police officer who led the SWAT team to Ayawaso West, Wuogon, which was largely, according to the report, responsible for the violence that happened on that particular day. His name is Samuel Azugu. That gentleman is also be recommended for removal and reassigned to a different institution by the IGP, according to the Ayawaso West Wuogon Commission's report. Now, these are recommendations. They are not the finalized action points, because as we know with all of these reports, there's somebody who's supposed to act on them. The executive president is supposed to issue a white paper. That white paper will give true meaning to whether or not all of these things are acceptable, needless, or to some extent going to be enforced. But before that, there are people who understand the system and these issues more than my good self. The Honorable Emmanuel Bombande, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
I hope you are doing well this day.
I'm doing fine. Traveling a lot.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're a big man, because that's why you are virtually all over the place. Yes. Now, let me get this clarified. The last point that John Indebugu raised was that, to all intents and purposes, he was expecting that the report should have been released early and action done early enough so that we send a signal to the people that we are serious about this. Even though the time frame was 6 months, he was expecting that more action and the report would have been done early enough so that we can take the necessary actions required of it. To that extent, he always had a belief that this commission's work was always going to be a difficult one, because the president has the final say. Yes. And the president has to deal with his own officials in this particular case. This is always a tough call for politicians. He doesn't believe that it will go very far. You, I'm sure, were aware of the committee sittings.
Yes.
And I'm sure you have seen some of the recommendations.
Just scanning.
Yes. Just on the face of it, was this an exercise worth a sort?
the exercise was worth it.
Yeah.
And I'll attribute that to the caliber of the ML Short Commission.
Okay.
And the personalities involved. And to that extent, they carried themselves with the national interest at heart. And they have demonstrated that. But I agree with the Honorable John Debure that because of the shock the nation received, the incidences of Ayawaso West by-election, the speed, the expediency with which the type of responses should have then taken place would then be commensurate with the seriousness we attach to it. But be it as it may, the point now is what would be the government white paper. And to that extent, I think we can now move from the recommendations of the Commission's report. I even take particular note that the Commission was not happy that there was a delay in commencing the criminal investigations, which was more an operational matter, even before the Commission could do its work. And so the timeline that Honorable Johnny Debure puts to it is not just about the policy aspects, but even the operational aspects that the police themselves should have engaged in terms of the time. Ghanaians would have been probably more satisfied that the agency and expediency was commensurate with the magnitude of the shock that we all saw and witnessed in the violence of the by-election.
I know you don't advise the current president.
Yes.
But if you have some advice on whether or not he should accept entirely this report, mindful of the position it finds itself, there are ministers he appointed that are involved in this. There are also police leadership that he has control over in this particular case. To be seen as acting in a way that will appease the entire nation, should the president accept in its entirety this report and ask for its operationalization, or we cannot take away his rights of amending, changing, or deciding to do away with the report entirely?
Your preface is right in terms of direct advice, not this government. But I always have the attitude that my good advice is good for any president.
That's interesting.
And President John Mahama saw that in me and said, Emmanuel, you must work with me. So let me take it from that point. Yes, I think that the president should accept the recommendations in their entirety. But there is something much deeper than that. It's not just about accepting the recommendations. It's about demonstrating the political will that he can rise up to the national interest as the President of the Republic of Ghana and act in a manner that suggests and says very clearly that if you think that in trying to project the interests of the party that brought me to power, you can disregard the rule of law and cause mayhem, you are wrong.
Send a clear signal.
Send a clear signal. And he will not be the only president to do that. You see, commissions of inquiry by their nature would end up recommendations that would not be particularly pleasing to a sitting president. Now, when a sitting president goes beyond partisan political interests and acts as the president of the republic, the president does well in the way the white paper then would be executed. But when the president lacks the political will, then the recommendations would be read, but the white paper would fall short of executing those recommendations. If you look at the Wako Commission of Inquiry, you would see a similar pattern in which President John Kufuor had to act in a manner that would not necessarily accrue to what could be described as the political interest to which he belonged.
So, for example, the minister was recommended for prosecution or is it removal? He didn't do so.
So then he was caught in between, how do I balance the execution through a white paper of what must be done to satisfy our political interests, but at the same time to act as the president of the Republic of Ghana and the head of state. And because the presidents are politicians, there is always that, if you would call it, dilemma. But if I were to respond to your question, you are the president of the Republic. Your actions today also accumulate into your legacy. The students who would be reading political science, the future of Ghana, when the history is rewritten, they will be talking about you who stood up against the current that probably was not going to help you politically to act in the interest of the nation. Then you become a leader. Then you become a Mandela. And so the choice now is for President Akufo-Addo.
So posterity.
Posterity.
As against entering political gratification.
Precisely. And what it does is to send a signal that don't think that on my behalf, you can go out there and cause wrongdoing, engage in violence, and expect that because you belong to the party that brought me into office, I will look aside. I will deal with you just as I will deal with any Ghanaian. It doesn't matter whether the NPP, the NDC, the CPP, and so forth and so on. And this is why leadership and governance becomes in itself an act that demands courage and discernment, not in the interest of different political persuasions, but in the national interest of the country.
It's very interesting, the point you raised there. Now, furthering that particular point, Lion Debugri picked out the recommendation for the reprimand of a minister of state and said that is a weak point. It's not punitive enough. We need to move beyond that if you want to make it punitive by asking Parliament to censure him. That's if you really mean it. Or the president, mindful of how this is a dent on the government as an institution, should move beyond that and either remove him or recommend him for prosecution, especially when it states that he was ultimately responsible for the people who were deployed to cause the mayhem that happened on the day. What do you think about that? Is the call for reprimand enough, punitive?
You see, if you were to ask my personal opinion on this, in Ghana, we need to all understand that responsibility that is entrusted on us to serve in office also comes with our willingness to accept to be held accountable. And that accountability starts with us, even before our principals, the presidents who appoint us, act. So, for me, the journey should have started with the Honorable Minister holding himself accountable and stepping aside.
Oh, I see.
There would have been nothing that would bring more integrity than that. Because what is happening now is that the people of Ghana are going to look to the president to sanction him. And if he does not sanction him, then there will be the discussions about why he did not. But if he sanctions him, the question would be, to what extent is a sanction enough? And maybe that's what Honorable John Ndebu is raising. My view, and not only for this Honorable Minister, and we should be fair to everybody, anybody in my time, in the current time, if you have responsibility to manage the affairs of state in office, because we run an executive system of government, all of us who serve, we do so as advisors, as aides to the president. That's the structure of our constitution. We must be able to help our presidents to govern well by taking responsibility for our own actions. And that brings integrity to what we do, rather than hold on when we know that what we did was wrong, and then the ball is in the court of the president to sack us or not to sack us. We need to mature in our democracy so that individuals recognize that you are there with a certain privilege to serve the people, but it also then comes with the accountability to take decisions on your own for the purposes of good governance. Because it's not just about governance, we're talking about the practice of good governance.
That's an interesting point you raised there. Now, one man, and perhaps the man who's director of operations at the specific unit of the national security, who's also been asked to be reprimanded, and his fault is that being ultimately responsible for the outcome of the SWAT operation at the Labalesi place, he did not only fail to tell them their proper mission there, he also failed to make sure that they stuck to a mission that was not illegal in its outcome. There's also in this same report a recommendation for the disbanding of that particular SWAT unit at the national security. In fact, Lawyer Ndebugri is of the opinion that that unity in an office of is illegal because national security, the council by its defined responsibilities, is not supposed to raise its own army or police or any of such institution. What do you think?
So the legal agreement has been established. Yeah. But the way I want to situate this is, if you look, I've not read the report, but scanning through the report, there are two levels. There is the operational level.
That's true.
The sanctions that come on the operational level holds accountable those who are in the theater of operation. That is much easier to do.
Yeah.
Because it goes without saying that the Inspector General of Police should be able to act knowing very well that operational duties
fall within its remit,
and they were done and executed completely in violations of the normal police operational duties.
That's true.
To the extent, therefore, that even the police was used only to infiltrate and carry on an operation on the blind side of the police.
Yeah.
Because some of the police commanders said they were not aware.
They were not aware. Indeed, the report makes that very clear.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that is why the magnitude of this case is very, very important for the future of our democracy. It's because people took it upon themselves that they can infiltrate our normal police service system and execute a completely different agenda. Now, so that is where I think the matter at the operational level can happen, and therefore in referring to the commander, it's very easy for me for that section to be done. But the other aspect of the report looks at the supervisory roles of policy making, and that's where ministers of state come in line, and that is where the responsibility then lies with the president of the republic. And to that extent, I've already made the comment about the president weighing the options of the president of the republic that then serves the national interest for everybody versus trying to look at them as people who come from his political position.
You came to mind immediately when the Commission recommended streamlining and clarifying of the rules of the national security setup as it is today. It talks about the various people, about 5 or so specific positions, the Minister of State, a National Security Advisor, a National Security Operations Person, and others who seem to be, in the Commission's opinion, having diffused the responsibility and command structure for dealing with this matter in a more coherent way.
Raymond, I remember in our last conversation, I raised this issue. The fact that the president introduced new elements in our security architecture, the architecture itself was reformulated. If you reformulate our national security architecture, you have to clearly bring the type of command structures, communication structures, and coherence and coordination that will make the additions you made to be effective. And to that extent, therefore, the Commission is pointing out that he should do that. But I think that's where it is not enough.
Okay.
It's not enough in the sense that in good practice, the more people you have in the architecture that you introduce to play various roles, the more incoherence and lack of coordination you also introduce. And that is why, whereas he's the commander-in-chief, and whereas our executive structure allows the president to manage his government the way he seems fit, let's talk and agree that when it comes to the security of the nation, it is more important than anything else.
Okay.
Because it's not about the president who is in office, but it's about the system that allows the president to ensure the protection of civilians, the protection of our sovereign territory, and everything that is associated with our security. And that is why we must agree as a nation, even under legislation, that if the Minister for the Interior is the one responsible for internal security, let it be.
That's all.
That's all. So that the others play their role, not also at ministerial or cabinet level.
Okay.
But the moment you introduce these other elements, the difficulty now would arise in how you define their roles and responsibilities, in order that it does not clash with the roles and responsibilities of your Minister of Interior. And to that extent, therefore, you create that gridlock or incoherence in your security architecture. And Ghana is not the only one in the recent past to go through this.
This particular difficulty.
This particular difficulty. That's why if you take, again, I'm not somebody who is a favorite of looking at examples from democracies that have been there for long. But for the lack of for comparative analysis, we normally are obliged. That's in America today. The public demand is, if you have let go your national security advisor, John Bolton, we need to know who is next. And the analysis then goes to say that their roles help the people of America to be satisfied that the president alone cannot be doing everything, including the expertise that is required in the area of security. And so, in the same way for our president, who is advising you? Is it the
Minister of State and National Security?
Is it the Minister of State
or the Minister Substantive at National Security?
Or is it the Substantive Minister?
Or National Security Advisor?
Or is it your National Security
Or a coordinator
advisor?
in this particular case?
Exactly. So we need to say that because of the nature of security and the added responsibility is what is happening across the world, across the globe, and in our sub-region. You want clarity of your security architecture, and that does not confuse our servicemen and women. Because you don't want your police to be caught in the ambivalence of
not knowing who to report to.
Exactly. And all that brings a type of incoherence. People throw their weight about the who is who. And keep in mind, the president will always be busy. And he cannot wake up and have the sense of watching all these actors. And that's why, to make it simple, we have a simplified security architecture, internal, for the internal. Defense is for our territorial integrity. Then you have your Security Council, which the president chairs. And in that Security Council, all the coordinating role is for your National Security Coordinator.
I see.
And then you have your advisor, who then is your day-to-day contact with your cabinet that is responsible for the coordination of security.
It's, to be fair, I think that this conversation can go on for a very long time, and it's wonderful exposition you bring to it. And I'm sure when the white paper is finally released, we can proceed to have that conversation on this and into much more detail. Forgive me to move on to another topic of importance to all of us here. Now, I'm privileged to know that you were in that particular General Assembly room when the 024 addressed it.
Yes.
This is also because you had some specific thoughts on Facebook.
Yes.
And I'm quoting a section on that. It says, without describing too much of those details, suffice it to say that those who tried to push 024 into any form of declaration that it was on his account that President John Mahama accepted defeat following the 2016 elections only succeeded in doing a disservice to the office of His Majesty 024 Asantehene. This type of attitude must halt immediately. How do you mean?
So the drafting of such a public statement at that level of international attention in the General Assembly must be well considered by those in the office of His Majesty who were making this for him to declare. And let me quickly say this. I had a meeting on Friday morning that ended at 10. And I knew 024 was going to speak at 10. So I rushed to the public gallery of the General Assembly, but I had to move at 11 for another meeting. It took time before 024 himself came on stage. But I started to listen and to feel in that room what 024 Asantehene was articulating. Wonderful. I felt proud as a Ghanaian. He basically, in short, in a few words, he looked at our internal capacity as a nation to deal with internal issues. He looked at some of the work of the National Peace Council, and he then talked about how in different elections, traditional institutions, religious leaders, the National Peace Council have played various roles. There was then that paragraph in which he started to recount that the moral authority of Asante was available. And it then went on to talk about how, on his account, the former president, John Dramani Mahama, conceded defeat in 2016. And that was preceded with describing 2016 as Ghana being on the brink of disaster. Those who put this for 024 were not honest with themselves. It's in 2008 that we came close to a brink. It was in 2008, airlines diverted their flights. Some landed in Lome. Banks closed earlier than 4. It was not in 2016. The anxiety in 2016 was that the website of the Electoral Commission was hacked, and Ghanaians were waiting and waiting for the final results to come out. But that's not for me my focus. My focus is simple, and it's for the lessons that we must learn. His Majesty's office, the traditional institution of Manshia, is precious. Let's not play with it. Let's continue to give it value. Let us allow it to be what it is. It is for this reason that when he calls people to a conversation that is discreet, the authority allows consent. Our political leaders, including a sitting president, would willingly go because of the trust they give to that office.
That's true.
But anything that is discussed around the conversation must remain discreet. I'm saying this as an expert in mediation, 20 years, and now across the world, and no other reason. I'm saying that mediation requires that when you have a conversation with people, depending on how you did it, what information came out, whether from you or from the parties, it stays with you.
I see.
By articulating on the floor of the General Assembly that upon his action, the former president conceded defeat. Let's not argue
whether or not it is true.
But let's say that he was talking in front of a global audience. And by bringing those details, you undermine the sanctity, the ethics, and the discipline that comes with good mediation practice. Not because of what you did, but what you will continue to do.
In the future, in this case.
Yes, I don't want in the future for UPfront to invite people and consent becomes difficult to go for the simple reason that I'm not sure whether you will talk about what I will discuss with you in a forum. His Majesty is way above that. And those of us in practice and expertise must be available to support His Majesty. So I'm not blaming His Majesty, but I'm blaming anybody near him who should have provided good practice and wise counsel. And I say this for a very simple reason. Some of our principals are very good at catching any detail. And I'll give you two quick examples. When I was in government, if you gave President Mahama any piece of paper, he quickly would scrutinize it and immediately give you a feedback if you needed to. And of course, I was not a speech drafter. But the one I even worked with, His Excellency Mohammed Ibn Chambers, he says, Emmanuel, I've looked at these ideas and we are traveling in the air and we're supposed to land somewhere for him to deliver. He says, Emmanuel, can you look at it this way again? And by the time you look at the paper, it's full of ink. So I'm running and editing and trying to get a reprint. You must never expose your principal. You must be so professional that you are constantly taking what your principal is about to deliver and engaging your principal, not on the basis of the text, but here on the basis of how mediation would be understood publicly. And saying, no, if I were to sit now, that paragraph, I'll edit it differently. It will carry the same message, but it will not be the way it came out.
I see. That's an interesting perspective. I want to move to one more issue that I want to ask you about. And because you are a man of extraordinary experience in this area, we know that the police concluded their work on the Takoradi missing girls. There is already out there a conversation as to whether the family and the families, I mean, at least three out of the 4 have actually rejected this and demanding a fresh and independent review of the situation to determine whether or not the DNA was worth what's supposed to be it. There are some who have also separated the issues and said what the family demanded was not a scientific process reviewed, but rather what has led to that particular process. First, they said they never saw the DNA report. 2, they say that by the handling of the police and the conduct of the CID boss, it leaves much to be desired in this particular case. Going forward, police, civilian and citizens' relationship in this country, what lessons can we learn from the Ayawaso situation to improve it?
First of all, Raymond, the police must quickly realize that in democratic policing, you must always carry along the people with you. Right from day one on this kidnapping tragedy of the Takoradi girls, the police operations have been constantly inconsistent and confusing.
Okay.
Today it is this story, and the following day the story changes to the other. And as it went on, promises that were never kept, and that now appear to be misleading. Let's not go into those details. But as you said, going forward, one, you must be honest with the people, even if it means that honesty brings the type of anger at that point.
Okay.
But because you are truthful with them,
It will be consistent.
they will be prepared to accept that pain and appreciate your work. But when you appear to be misleading the people because you have to say one thing to cover what you
Or
have
give
said
them
before,
hope.
you give false hope. But two, Ghanaians have to be shocked. We shouldn't leave it to only the families of the kidnapped girls. This is something that is a scar on the conscience of our nation. And we must all be shocked that police operations failed in uncovering such a tragedy in a way that is dignified. And that for me is the confusion. And so the police must see their responsibility beyond just the police duty and to look at how are they carrying the entire nation, to be aware that in our subconscious, this type of high level of crime is completely unacceptable, intolerable, and that because it happened, the equal response to ensure that it can never happen again is seen in the day-to-day operations of their work. How did they do that? The way you constantly update the public.
Okay.
You must be very good at constantly updating the public. What is happening is that when there's a major incident and the police appear, it's as if they go back to hide, hoping that the problem will take care of itself. It doesn't take care of itself. You must be able to constantly come out and say that today on this issue, this is the progress we have made. There are these challenges that remain. We hope that we'll be able to meet those challenges, but we assure you that we are doing our best moving forward. The people then accept that. But when police operations become confused they are as they have been, it presents a difficulty. So my last comment on this, we need more professionalization of the police and their operations.
In its current and existing form, does it fall short?
You must constantly learn and improve upon where you are. The interesting thing is
it retraining that's the problem, or they need freshmen?
Retraining is something that must constantly happen.
Don't they need freshmen?
Even the recruitment forms part of the professionalization.
Okay, that's an interesting point to note.
It is possible that it might not be as true as it looks, but what Ghanaians know now is that police recruitment has become politicized.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about it. When with all that halt, and that is why the way they will respond as police will now make Ghanaians to be confident that there will be a different police in the future, or it will still be the police that we have at the moment. And that's why people whose roles have created this confusion should do what is honorable and take the first step to resign before they are dismissed.
Oh, that's interesting to know. In this case, you're not referencing the CID boss.
I don't want to mention one particular police officer.
Okay.
Yes.
But you think there should headmaster role?
You must have the dignity of responsibility.
Yeah.
You must hold yourself accountable.
Thank you so much.
Headmaster role will be police command structures.
Yeah.
But as an opinion that is shared by people like us, it's about holding yourself accountable.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you so
much. And Emmanuel Bombande is a mediation expert. Folks, that's where we end today's edition of UPfront. Many thanks for staying with us on this day's edition.